Hello BookTube, my name is Juan. I am just one reader coming to you with a Friday Reads video. I am super excited. It's a beautiful, delightful, sunny, really sunny morning, very warm morning here in Mexico City. And I am just filled with delight and excitement because this week for me, reading-wise, was incredibly productive. I completed 2 books, which is a lot for me, especially considering one of those books was pretty long, over 600 pages, and I am also starting 2 books, one fiction, one nonfiction, that I think are wonderful, and hopefully they will be of interest to you, my beautiful watcher, viewer. Watcher sounds like a horror movie. Anyway, so the first book that I want to just briefly mention, and I say briefly because I don't think that the audience for this channel is going to really be interested in this kind of book, but I just want to mention it because this is one of my favorite books now of the year and probably of all time. Like, this was so enriching for me. This is a book called The New Analyst's Guide to the Galaxy. This is a book on psychoanalysis and psychotherapy by Antonino Ferro, who is one of the leading European psychoanalysts working today. He is following the new psychoanalysis, the contemporary psychoanalysis, moving away from Freud and the earlier orthodox psychoanalysis that used to be practiced very heavily in the world, all over the world. And now more and more we are seeing a new, more lively, more alive, more energetic and playful psychoanalysis, which is the kind of psychoanalysis that I think I do, being a young analyst myself. So this book was just delightful. This man is so wise. He's a senior analyst, and he is providing us, the reader, with incredible lessons on technique and clinical practice, but also the analytical attitude, the analytical life, and just, he kind of brings us back to what psychoanalysis really is and really should be, so that we don't lose track of that. So I loved this book. It was so funny and so playful because psychoanalysis is very playful and very funny oftentimes, even when we are dealing with suffering and with people's anxiety and frustration and anger and hate and loss and all of those heavy, heavy things. It's still a very playful thing, I think. So I loved this book. I easily gave it 5 stars. It was one of those books that just gave me life. Then I read something incredibly different. This is by Joe Abercrombie. Best Served Cold. Best Served Cold is a standalone novel that takes place within the First Law world. So the First Law is the First Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie is a fantasy trilogy that I read earlier in the year. I think I read them in January and February. And I really, really loved those books. They were so different. I really loved the writing in those books specifically. And there was like an aura of wonder, of mystery, of mysticism in those books that you never quite understood everything about the magic and the lore. And I really love that. So this book, Best Served Cold, is set within the same universe, although it takes place in another part of the world, in another country. And there is war, there are different cities and states and politics involved, but really, at its core, this is a revenge story, a revenge tale. Therefore, Best Served Cold is the fitting title. So we follow the protagonist, Monza, and she's like a badass woman who has been wronged, who has been betrayed, and now she is seeking vengeance, revenge. So we are following this character as she finds a gang of really interesting sidekick, secondary characters, and they all come together in this kind of team to, bring revenge to the people that wronged Monza. So the book was good. It was a good book. It was interesting. I read it within 5 days. So, and let me tell you, it's a long book. It's almost 700 pages. The plot is very engaging. It's compelling. You keep reading. It's easy to read. What I loved the most about this book actually was not the plot or the revenge at all. What I really loved about this book, and for the First Law trilogy, it also applies. What I love the most is Joe Abercrombie's writing style, his authorial voice. He has this lines, these little lines of text that sort of repeat throughout the text, and I don't know, there's something about his voice, his style. It's his style in the book, in his books, that I think is really interesting, really funny. A lot of people say that he is grimdark. I don't know about that. I actually find all of his books that I've read so far incredibly lively and funny, and not necessarily hopeful, but I never feel despair, like in a Game of Thrones, for example, which are very serious books. Here, I think these books feel a little cartoonish, actually, and I mean that as a good thing. They feel very cartoonish, very funny, very lighthearted, even though you are watching some really gruesome, bloody, violent things happening throughout the book, and also very sexual things. It feels a little silly, a little mocking of itself, and I love that. So I really loved that aspect of it. I also think he's a great author of characters. I really, really like his characters. The characters in this particular novel I didn't find as three-dimensional or profound as in the previous trilogy, but sorry, excuse me, but I did really like the way that he uses characters' voices, the way that there's dialogue, keeping the story moving forward. Now, let me tell you, as much as I liked this book, I only gave it 3 stars. And the reason why is that I think the book had to be shorter. It had to be shorter, and it would have been better. Also, I think the story gets quite stale and repetitive and boring towards the ending. The latter portion of the book, the latter half of the book, I felt I was a little tired by the violence, and it's the same thing happening over and over again. It's a repetitive novel, and even though it's fun and exciting to see what happens, and there's really good dialogue, I thought it overstayed its welcome, honestly. So I'm only giving it 3 stars, but Joe Abercrombie is a really interesting stylist. So that's what I finished this week. Now, I am reading a book that every time I think about it, or talk about it, or just pick it up, I immediately light up, like there's a smile in my face. I never thought this book would be as amazing as it is. The View from the Cheap Seats by Neil Gaiman. This is a collection of nonfiction pieces, essays, articles, just random nonfiction things by Neil Gaiman. This might be the best Neil Gaiman book that I've ever read. This might be better than his fiction. I really like Neil Gaiman. I've read many books by him. I wouldn't say that I've read everything by him, because that's not true or possible. Well, it is possible, but no. I have read some short stories by him that I really like. I have read many of his novels. I really love Neverwhere. I really like American Gods. I've read Anansi Boys. I've read The Graveyard Book. The Ocean at the End of the Lane is probably my favorite. That and Neverwhere. I love Neil Gaiman, but this is just something else entirely. This is a collection of nonfiction pieces, and Wow, this is like really, really top tier Neil Gaiman. He talks about many things in this book. It's a long book because it's a collection. What's going on with my voice this morning? Oh my God. Anyway, excuse me. It's a collection, and therefore it's longer. You have to take it in small doses. You don't want to overdose on something good. You don't want to overdose on anything, really, but especially not on something good, because this is a book that will eventually be over, and I don't want it to be over. He talks about music, films, books, writing, reading, libraries, comic books, science fiction, fantasy, genres, fairy tales, the importance of reading and of reading to children especially. This book is going to be 5 stars. I am telling you right now. It's absolutely delightful. And finally, I am reading another book that I honestly don't know how to explain this to you. Okay. Something that you need to know about me is that my favorite book of all time is The Never-Ending Story by Michael Ende. The Never-Ending Story takes place in a fantasy universe or a fantasy world called Fantasia or Fantasia. You can pronounce it any way you want. In Spanish, it's beautiful, Fantasia. So in this place of Fantasia, something really wonderful is that this is an ever-expanding world. It's a world that never runs out of stories. It's the never-ending story. So it's a never-ending, never, always expanding universe. There's always more stories to be told within this universe. And so some German authors decided to write some novels taking place within Fantasia. And this is one of them. So this is a novel by German, I don't know if she's German, but this is written in German, Tanja Kinkel, and she wrote this book, which would be translated in English as The King of Buffoons. In Spanish, it's El Rey de los Bufones. And this is the first novel that takes place within Fantasia. So it's a story within Fantasia. And it's based upon the world that was created by Michael Ende in The Never-Ending Story. So it's kind of the never-ending story universe. I am starting to read this book, and it's so delightful to be back in this world. It's beautifully written. The only caveat here is that this book is not available in English. I am reading it in the Spanish translation. It was translated weirdly from German to Spanish, but as far as I can tell, there's no English translation. So I'm sorry, you can get this in German or in Spanish, as far as I know. But this is delightful. It's good fantasy. It's slow but fairy tale-esque fantasy. Very much, very similar to The Never-Ending Story. So this is, I'm pretty certain this book will be incredible, but I will tell you more about this when I finish it. Anyway, that's what I am reading this weekend and next week. Let me know in the comments down below what are you reading this weekend, and I will see you on the next video.